The Janitor's Last Lesson, a story of perception, wisdom, and the success they never saw coming. My name is Michael Santos, and for 15 years, I was invisible. I mopped floors at Wellington Prep Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in Massachusetts, where tuition costs more than most people's annual salary. Students walked past me without a glance. Teachers treated me like furniture. Parents looked through me as if I didn't exist. They saw a janitor, uneducated, simple, doing menial work because I had no other options. They were wrong about everything. And by the time they realized who I really was, I'd already taught them the most important lesson of their lives. Never judge a book by its cover. This is the story of how I used 15 years of invisibility to build something extraordinary, and how the people who dismissed me learned that success is the sweetest revenge, and that wisdom often comes from the most unexpected places. I started working at Wellington Prep Academy in September 2008, 2 months after the economy collapsed and took my previous life with it. Before the crash, I was Michael Santos, PhD in philosophy from MIT, visiting professor at Boston University, published author of 2 moderately successful books on ethics and human potential. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable, respected in academic circles, building a career I loved. Then the recession hit. Universities cut budgets. Adjunct positions disappeared. My teaching contract wasn't renewed. My publisher dropped my 3rd book deal. Within 6 months, I went from professor to unemployed, drowning in student loans and unable to find work in my field. I applied for hundreds of academic positions, got 3 interviews, 0 offers. Overqualified, not the right fit. We're going in a different direction. Meanwhile, my savings evaporated. I sold my car, then my furniture, moved from my apartment to a friend's couch, then to a shelter when I wore out my welcome. At 42 years old, with a PhD and 2 published books, I was homeless. That's when I saw the posting. Custodial staff needed. Wellington Prep Academy, $15 an hour plus benefits. It wasn't teaching. It wasn't philosophy. It wasn't what I'd spent 8 years in graduate school preparing for. But it was survival. I took the job. On my first day, the head custodian, a kind man named Luis Rodriguez, showed me around. "You're overqualified for this," he said, glancing at my resume. "Right now, I'm just qualified enough to need it," I replied. He smiled. "Fair enough, but let me give you some advice. People here will treat you like you're invisible. Students, teachers, parents, they don't see janitors as real people. Don't let it get to you." I won't. But Luis was right. Within days, I understood what he meant. I'd be mopping a hallway while students talked about their weekend plans, their college anxieties, their relationship drama, never once acknowledging I was there. I'd clean a classroom while teachers graded papers and complained about administrators, as if I couldn't hear every word. Parents would literally step over my mop bucket without a "excuse me" or "thank you." I was invisible, a ghost in a janitor's uniform. At first, it stung. I'd spent my career teaching students to think critically, to question assumptions, to recognize the humanity in everyone. And now those same types of students, privileged, educated, destined for Ivy League schools, treated me like I didn't exist. But then I realized something. Invisibility is a superpower. If people don't see you, they don't guard themselves around you. They reveal who they really are. And I started paying attention. I noticed the star student, Brandon Chen, who everyone thought was brilliant, but who I'd seen cheating on every major exam by hiding notes in the bathroom before tests. I noticed the beloved English teacher, Mrs. Patricia Hartwell, who talked about inspiring young minds, but who I'd overheard mocking struggling students in the faculty lounge, calling them dead weight who'd never amount to anything. I noticed the principal, Dr. Robert Wellington III, grandson of the school's founder, who gave speeches about integrity and character while secretly funneling school funds into personal investments. And I noticed the students who were actually brilliant, actually hardworking, actually kind, but overlooked because they weren't wealthy enough, connected enough, or polished enough to fit Wellington Prep's image. For 2 years, I just observed, cleaned, stayed invisible. But I was also learning something profound. Wellington Prep, despite its prestige and price tag, was failing its students in the most fundamental way. It was teaching them that image mattered more than substance, that connections mattered more than character, that money could solve any problem. It was creating an entire generation of people who'd never learned the most important life lessons. And I decided to do something about it. In my 3rd year at Wellington, I started a small experiment. During my lunch breaks, I'd sit in the empty library and read philosophy, history, literature, science, books I'd loved as a professor but hadn't had time to revisit. Eventually, students noticed. A few would ask what I was reading. Marcus Aurelius, Stoic philosophy. He was a Roman emperor who believed that external circumstances don't determine your happiness. Your response to them does. A few students would nod politely and walk away, but occasionally one would sit down. "What does that mean?" a sophomore named Emma Garcia asked one day. "It means you can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control how you react. That's where your real power is." Emma looked skeptical. "That sounds nice, but it's not realistic. If something bad happens, you're just supposed to be okay with it?" "Not okay with it, but not destroyed by it either. You acknowledge reality, then decide how to move forward. That's wisdom." She came back the next day with more questions, then the next week, then she brought a friend. Within a year, I had a small group of students who'd meet me in the library during lunch. We'd discuss philosophy, psychology, ethics, the big questions of human existence. I called it the invisible curriculum. Everything Wellington Prep didn't teach. We talked about on success. Real success isn't what you achieve, it's who you become while achieving it. A Harvard degree means nothing if you're miserable, unethical, or empty inside. On failure, failure isn't the opposite of success, it's the tuition you pay for wisdom. Every person you admire has failed more times than you've tried. On self-worth, your value as a human being has nothing to do with your GPA, your college acceptance, or your parents' bank account. You're inherently worthy just by existing. On perspective, when you're stressed about a test or a college rejection, remember, 100 years from now, no one will remember any of this. What matters is how you treated people and what you learned about being human. On authenticity, the world will try to mold you into someone marketable, someone profitable, someone conventional. Resist. The most valuable thing you can offer the world is your authentic self. The students ate it up. These were kids under immense pressure. Pressure to be perfect, to get into top schools, to live up to impossible expectations. Nobody had ever told them it was okay to be human. My group grew to 20 regular students, then 30, then 50. By year 5, I had students from every grade level meeting me during lunch, before school, after school. We'd discuss everything from Plato to neuroscience to what makes a good life. The teachers and administrators noticed, but dismissed it. The janitor has a little book club. How cute. They had no idea what I was actually teaching. Then came Tyler Morrison. Tyler was a junior, son of Richard Morrison, hedge fund billionaire, Wellington Prep's biggest donor, chair of the board of trustees. Tyler was smart but entitled, used to getting everything he wanted through his father's money and influence. He joined my group one day, sent by his girlfriend, Emma, the same Emma who'd first sat down with me years earlier. "Emma says you teach real stuff," Tyler said, looking skeptical. "What does that mean?" It means I teach things that actually matter. Not how to ace the SAT, but how to build a meaningful life. Can't I do both? Most people can't because they confuse achievement with fulfillment. They spend their lives chasing external validation, grades, money, status, and wonder why they're miserable despite having everything. Tyler smirked. That sounds like something a poor person would say to feel better about being poor. Several students gasped. Emma looked mortified. I smiled. You're right, it does sound like that. And I am poor by your standards. I mop floors for $15 an hour. But I'm also happier than most of the wealthy people I've met, including your father.
You don't know my father. I know he's never at your games, never at parent-teacher conferences, never home for dinner. I know you told Emma you'd trade all his money for one genuine conversation with him. Tyler's face went red. How do you... Because you're not invisible to me, Tyler. I see you. The real you, not the performance you put on. And that kid is hurting because he's been taught that money solves everything, except it can't solve the one thing he actually wants, to be seen by his father. Tyler stood up and left. Didn't come back for 3 weeks. Then one day he appeared in the library with red eyes. My dad forgot my birthday, he said quietly. He's in Dubai on business. Sent his assistant to drop off a card with a check for $10,000. That's what I'm worth to him. 10 grand. You don't know my father. I know he's never at your games, never at parent-teacher conferences, never home for dinner. I know you told Emma you'd trade all his money for one genuine conversation with him. Tyler's face went red. How do you... Because you're not invisible to me, Tyler. I see you. The real you, not the performance you put on. And that kid is hurting because he's been taught that money solves everything, except it can't solve the one thing he actually wants, to be seen by his father. Tyler stood up and left. Didn't come back for 3 weeks. Then one day he appeared in the library with red eyes. My dad forgot my birthday, he said quietly. He's in Dubai on business. Sent his assistant to drop off a card with a check for $10,000. That's what I'm worth to him. 10 grand and a signature someone else wrote. I'm sorry, Tyler. You were right. About everything. I've spent my whole life thinking money makes you powerful, but I'm the son of a billionaire and I can't even get my father to remember I exist. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. That's honest. Let's start there. Tyler became one of my most dedicated students. We worked through his anger, his pain, his confusion about who he was beyond his father's wealth. The greatest revenge against people who don't value you, I told him, is to become someone so fully yourself, so genuinely fulfilled that their absence doesn't diminish you. By senior year, Tyler had transformed. He'd quit playing the entitled rich kid, started volunteering at homeless shelters, had genuine conversations with classmates he'd previously ignored, applied to colleges based on what he wanted to study, not what would impress his father. And he credited our conversations in the library. You changed my life, he told me at graduation. Everything I thought mattered, money, status, impressing people, you showed me that's all empty. Real wealth is being true to yourself and treating people with dignity. You did that, Tyler. I just asked questions. No, you were the only person at this entire school who treated me like a human being instead of Richard Morrison's son. That changed everything. I was proud of Tyler, proud of all my students who'd learned to question assumptions, to think deeply, to value character over credentials. But I was just getting started. In year 7, something happened that changed everything. Dr. Wellington called me to his office. The first time in 7 years he'd spoken to me directly. Mr. Santos, we have a problem. Several teachers have complained that you're teaching students during lunch. I'm discussing ideas with students who want to discuss ideas. Is that against policy? It's irregular. You're not credentialed, you're not trained, and frankly, you're not qualified to be educating our students. I smiled. Not qualified? I have a PhD in philosophy from MIT. I was a published professor before the recession ended my academic career. I'm probably more qualified than half your faculty. His face went pale. You have a doctorate? Check your employment records. It's all there. I listed my education on my application. You hired me anyway because you needed a janitor and I needed a job. But why didn't you say something? Because I needed the work and because nobody asked. For 7 years, I've been invisible, just the janitor. But while I was mopping floors, I was teaching students lessons this school doesn't offer: critical thinking, ethical reasoning, self-awareness, the examined life. Without permission, students can talk to whoever they want during lunch. I never coerced anyone. I never claimed to represent the school. I just offered wisdom to kids who were hungry for something real. Dr. Wellington looked uncomfortable. Nevertheless, I'm going to have to ask you to stop. No. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not doing anything wrong. If you fire me for having lunch conversations, I'll make sure every newspaper in Boston knows that Wellington Prep, a school that charges $60,000 a year, fired the janitor for teaching students to think critically. That should make for great publicity. He stared at me. Are you blackmailing me? I'm standing up for what's right. There's a difference. I walked out of his office and went back to work. Dr. Wellington didn't fire me, but he started watching closely. Then came the scandal that changed everything. In year 10, the cheating ring was exposed. Remember Brandon Chen, the star student I'd seen cheating years earlier? Turns out he wasn't alone. There was an entire network, 37 students, 6 teachers, and several parents engaged in systematic cheating. Students paying for test answers, teachers looking the other way in exchange for donations to their personal funds, parents hiring people to take SATs for their kids. When a whistleblower exposed it, an anonymous tip to the Massachusetts Department of Education, the school exploded into scandal. Wellington Prep's reputation, carefully cultivated over 110 years, was destroyed overnight. Students were expelled, teachers were fired, Dr. Wellington resigned in disgrace. And you know who the whistleblower was? One of my students, Emma Garcia, the same girl who'd asked me about Marcus Aurelius years earlier. She'd documented everything she'd witnessed, submitted it all to the authorities, and refused to stay silent despite pressure from wealthy parents. You taught me that integrity matters more than comfort. I couldn't keep quiet. The scandal made national news. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN. Wellington Prep became synonymous with privileged corruption. But something else happened too. Reporters started interviewing students, and several of my kids mentioned the janitor who taught us philosophy. A reporter from The Atlantic tracked me down. Is it true you're a PhD from MIT working as a janitor? Yes. And you've been teaching philosophy to students during lunch for a decade? Yes. Why? Because these kids were being taught to value achievement over character, credentials over wisdom, image over authenticity. Someone needed to teach them something real. The article, titled "The Janitor Philosopher," when the smartest person at an elite school was cleaning the floors, went viral. Within a week, I'd been interviewed by NPR, featured on CBS Sunday Morning, and profiled in the Boston Globe. Universities contacted me, book publishers reached out, a TED Talk invitation arrived. The same academic world that had rejected me a decade earlier suddenly wanted me back. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. I didn't want it. I'd spent 10 years invisible, watching, learning, teaching, and I discovered something profound. Real impact doesn't require prestige or credentials. It requires presence and authenticity. I didn't need to be a professor to change lives. I'd changed more lives as a janitor than I ever had in academia. So I made a different choice. With the media attention, I launched an online platform called The Invisible Curriculum, free philosophy courses for anyone, anywhere. Video lectures on ethics, meaning, wisdom, the examined life. I wrote a book, The Janitor's Philosophy, Life Lessons from the Bottom of the Ladder, that became a surprise bestseller. I started a nonprofit that provided free philosophical counseling to people struggling with life's big questions. And I kept working at Wellington Prep. The administration begged me to stay because those students still needed someone to see them. Within 3 years, my work reached millions of people: students, janitors, CEOs, parents, teachers, people from every walk of life who were hungry for wisdom that actually mattered. I made more impact as the janitor philosopher than I ever would have as Professor Santos teaching 20 students per semester. The people who dismissed me for a decade, The teachers who ignored me, the students who walked past me, the parents who looked through me, now saw me everywhere. My book in their stores, my videos online, my story in their news feeds. And they learned the lesson I'd been teaching all along. Never judge books by their job title, their clothes, their apparent status. Wisdom comes from unexpected places. Dignity belongs to everyone. And the person mopping your floor might be the smartest person in the building. Last month, I was invited back to Wellington Prep for their 115th anniversary. Tyler Morrison, now 29, running a nonprofit that provides education to underprivileged kids, gave the keynote speech. 15 years ago, he said, I was the entitled son of a billionaire who thought money made me important. Then I met a janitor who taught me that real wealth is character, that real power is authenticity, that real success is living a life aligned with your values, not your bank account. He pointed to where I sat. Michael Santos changed my life not because he had a fancy title or drove a nice car. He changed it because he saw me, really saw me, and taught me to see myself. That's what great teachers do, and they can be found anywhere if you're humble enough to look. The audience applauded. Many were crying. After the ceremony, Dr. Wellington's replacement, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who actually cared about education over prestige, approached me. Mr. Santos, we'd like to create an endowed chair in your honor, the Santos Chair in Applied Philosophy. We want to ensure future Wellington students learn the lessons you taught. I appreciate that, but I have a condition. Name it. Make it available to your custodial staff too. Offer them free classes. Give them access to the same educational resources you offer students, because wisdom shouldn't be reserved for people who can afford $60,000 tuition.
She smiled. Done. Today, I split my time between cleaning floors at Wellington because I genuinely enjoy the work and the students, running the invisible curriculum platform, writing books, and giving talks about finding meaning in unexpected places. I make enough money now that I don't need the janitor job, but I keep it because it reminds me of the most important lesson I learned. Your circumstances don't define your worth. Your response to them does. I lost everything in the recession: career, status, security. I became invisible. But in that invisibility, I found clarity, purpose, impact. The people who dismissed me learned that success isn't about climbing ladders, it's about knowing which ladders are worth climbing. The students who looked past me learned that wisdom doesn't wear expensive suits. And I learned that the best revenge isn't destroying the people who underestimated you. It's becoming so fully, authentically yourself that their opinions become irrelevant. My name is Michael Santos. I have a PhD from MIT. I wrote best-selling books. I've taught millions of people. And I mop floors. All of those things are true. None of them contradict each other. Because a janitor can be a philosopher can be a janitor, and wisdom is available to anyone humble enough to seek it. The world teaches us to judge books by their covers, to value credentials over character, to equate success with status. But here's the secret they don't want you to know. The most important lessons often come from the most unlikely teachers. The smartest person in the room might be the one everyone's ignoring. And sometimes the janitor is the only one really seeing what's happening.